Saul Zenkevicius, welcome back to the show. How you doing?
Good. How are you, Dan?
Good. So for listeners who've been around a while, March 1st, 2019, Saul was on the show. We talked about leveling up in real estate, and he was just getting into industrial properties and I think getting out of the house flipping business. Saul and I were also partners in the Miami market, and we did quite a bit of business together in the Chicago market before the focus became commercial. Saul's the founding member of Z Equity. Do you have another company or any other company associations at this point we should
Yeah.
announce?
I'm also managing partner in Brait Fund, where Rafik Moore is my partner over there, and we're buying malls with that company.
Nice, nice. So before we dive into real estate, I want to hear the story of the climb to Mount Kilimanjaro.
All right. Mt Kilimanjaro. That was amazing experience. If I rate it from a trip where you feel the camaraderie and if I would rate it, in terms of memorable moments where you go with your business partners, or that it's not a vacation, but something that you do for your achievement, and changing the perspective, how you evaluate risk, and you conquer your ego. It was the top. It was number one thing I've done. I really like to do misogi type of trips. I am doing them at least once a year, and I do it with my kids, and not type of Kilimanjaro, but Kilimanjaro trip was 7 days. It's call it 5 days climb, and almost 2 days descent. So going to 20,000 feet elevation, and on the top it looks like on Mars. And everyone thinks that's really a big challenging physical feat, but actually it's only mental feat. I'm triathlete, and I was fairly sure that I'll be fine physically. I'm not going to have challenges, and I think probably I think a little bit too good about myself. But at the end of the day, the most challenging part was mental part, and frankly, the best physically trained person didn't summit. And it's really, if I try to describe it as the last few days, because altitude hits you, right? And almost everyone hits altitude. It starts hitting you, 15, 16,000 square when you in that elevation. And you understand that, you don't have it doesn't matter how many billions and millions you have, how many square feet you have, you are on your own. And of course, you have a team of people. But if you break the leg, it's pretty much you're in a big trouble, right? And it's on your own, and it's hitting because you have a lack of oxygen, you have a headache, and you can't going in that occasional kind of phobia or fear, and am I going to make it? Am I good enough? I mean, maybe I should go down. I mean, maybe I should. And it's just you're constantly battling yourself, right? And you have just some conquer ego, because logically, it's not the dangerous. It's pretty much, if you do everything right, there's very little chance something go wrong. But your ego start playing with you, and it's real. It's you need to defeat yourself. That's what it is. It's amazing experience. I was crying on the top, and um, if I would try to explain it, you just it's really emotional moment on the top, because you're realizing how easy everything in life is, uh, how all problems um, compared to conquering the fear of death, or something like that, is just such a minuscule. So it's really not physical feat, but really conquering yourself, going to the mental feat, and just understanding that everything else we're dealing, it's so unimportant, and so it's not worth our attention, actually. Yeah,
Yeah, it's trivial, right? A lot of the
exactly.
the stuff we think is life and death in our daily routine. So according to Google, there's about 4 to 7 people who die on that mountain every year. Did you know
Yeah.
that before you went?
Yes, I knew that. And well, I didn't know exactly accident, but I know that accidents happen. And it hit, let's say, the peak of that. So pretty much last night, last day when you go to the base camp, so you you kind of go up and go down, go up and go down. So the first 3 4 days, and you're acclimatized. And last day you are at approximately 16,000 feet elevation, and you come in like before lunch. You have a little 4 hour 5 hour sleep, and you wake up at midnight, and you storm from 16,000 20,000. That's your kind of last climb, what it is. And your porters, sherpas, they don't go anymore. So I mean, they all the way, you're with expedition pretty much. It's with 20 guys, and we had I think 50 sherpas. But then at the last base camp, they don't go anymore because that's literally the biggest lack of oxygen. And at the base camp, during those 4 hours or 5 hours we stayed there, I saw 3 rescue operations. So meaning when the helicopter comes in and just
Oh,
takes
wow.
people out. Yeah, it just takes people out of the mountain, and it just no one freaked out. No one even talked about. Everyone's like, "See, well, there's one coming."
Oh,
No one
man.
talks about it. Here's another one coming, and you have to storm that. And that chopper does not go to 20,000. The highest it can go like 15, 16,000. So it's
Okay.
so that 16,000, 20,000. I don't want to call death zone, but pretty much there is no rescue over there. We have to make it happen.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, I imagine
Yeah,
that's probably where the accidents happened. Did you happen to be, I know who you're talking about, and I'm not going to mention the name here live
yeah.
on air, but did you happen to be around him while he was having that decision to decide to, did he
Uh,
go back down or helivac?
no, there. I mean, he was probably only 20 minutes, before the peak. And what happened is that he felt really, really bad, really sick, and he started almost like being a little delusional. So we were going with 3 professionals who were our guides, and eventually he received a shot. I don't know what kind of shot, but is received the shot pretty much almost into this kind of heart here.
Oh, wow.
Um, and and then he was advised, we got to go down real quickly, because that's how the only way to alleviate elevation, you just have to go down as quickly as possible. And but yeah, what happened with him was a little bit delusional, and he was a little bit aggressive, and that type of stuff. And it was, I mean, all the expedition was kind of in danger, because of that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's
Yeah, but people on the last climb, people are getting hypothermia. There were situations where I had another jacket. I had to give my jacket to another colleague, and it was interesting and stuff. But in hindsight, it was beautiful. I think when that adrenaline kicks in, especially for me when I saw the chaos start happening in the last hour, actually my body, I became more awake. Even though I was like going very slow,
oh, man.
like that, then adrenaline kicks in. Of course, you start operating a little bit more awake, and you keep going, even though it's hard to move. But I didn't. My pain went away, and your headache went away. And it was great experience.
I did a an audio book recently. Annie Duke Quit. Have you heard of that one?
No.
So it's about quitting. Annie Duke is a poker player, and a lot of poker players get themselves in trouble when they refuse to quit. They just keep going.
Hmm.
They're dead set on their goal. They're planning on winning. They play terrible and they lose all their money.
Hmm.
So that's why she's, the expert to write the book on quitting, because she would know when to walk away from the table,
Hmm.
and have a longer career that way. She was talking about, it wasn't Kilimanjaro, it was one of the other mountains, but
Hmm.
3 people died on their way up. And she was talking about how hard it is to quit something once you've set the goal. So if the goal is to summit the mountain, the people who will oftentimes get themselves in trouble and then die, they probably have this point where they should turn around and go back down the mountain, but they're dead set on that goal that they've set. and refuse to quit and keep going, right? And I think that could be
Yeah.
applicable to a lot of places in life. You know, I want to build a certain amount of cash flow. I want to have a certain number of houses. I want to have a certain number of square feet of commercial. And maybe you get like very far into that goal, and it's like, should you keep going? Maybe there's reasons why you should quit, but there's this like inclination for driven people like ourselves and the people listening to the show to push forward, go through square peg in a round hole
Yeah.
kind of thing, right? And I think that the ability to walk, change direction, and come back down short of the goal is a useful skill, and it kept our friend alive, right?
Yeah. That's interesting perspective the way you say it, right? No, and I'm thinking, okay, so my first comment would be, yeah, so actually you just need to get clarity, you just have somehow to get clarity, because when you're in that mindset, right? So you when you're driven by the ego, just to get going, pretty much you're conquering your, you're in pain, but you don't hear it. Your mind is saying over 2 days, you get out, dude, this is too much, keep going, but you keep going because you're just so wrapped up in your goal. So I think it's another mastery level, right? When you're getting this clarity from whoever, right? It's completely different perception. I don't even know how to mountain to get that clarity. Where it's exactly what it is. It's just conquering ego, and you must see somehow ask for that blessing and the clarity. Someone tell you, hey, bro, that's the reality, that's the real, that's how it is, because we see differently, when we wrapped up in those thoughts and in our desires and egos and that type of stuff.
100%. Yeah. So you've been hanging out on the mountains a lot. I think it was a few years ago you started talking about Vail. I'm guessing this may have been because Danny was hanging out there that got you out there originally. Then Danny moved away.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, but let's touch on Vail a little bit. The rest of your
Yeah.
mountain man expedition here.
Yeah. Well, mountains is something very dear and close to my heart. Me and my family, my kids are skiing since they're 3 years old, and they like to be there very much. And me personally, I'm not like a beach person. I like hiking. I just like to be in the mountains. It just for me, it's really meditation without trying to meditate. As soon as I'm there in 15 minutes, I'm meditating. And just for me, everything slows down, especially I'm going, in a little higher in elevation. I can, go and walk for half a day, and cell phones does not work a lot of times over there. But yeah, so we've been going to Colorado for the last 10 years with kids skiing, and 2 or 3 years ago, being in real estate, I started doing the math. The rental prices, especially post-COVID, everything is going up so much in all vacation areas or mountain areas. And I started looking at, I think it's time to buy something. And there was nothing on the market, and nothing that I wanted to buy. It's not like, you can find a deal over there. It's very hard to find a deal. It just literally there's nothing to,
Yeah,
to choose from.
right.
So exactly. So what I did right before we went there, before we typically go, mid December or second part of December, stay, through mid January. I pulled the list, skip trace the list. No, it was only 2,000 actual addresses between like up to $2 million in properties. And while we're skiing, we dropped that mailer. And right before before we flew out, literally on the way to the airport, we scheduled, I think, 3 or 4 appointments, and last appointment during that week was on the way pretty much to the airport, and I walk it was Stone Creek Drive, and I'm turning right, and my son Mari, who was 14 at the time, he was taking the call, so he booked an appointment, and I turned right, and I seen the mountain in front of me. It's like, and that's pretty much the last house right before the mountain. I'm like, no
Nice.
matter what, I'm buying this house. Sure enough, sure enough, it was, the seller was a great lady. I really pretty much packaged the way that, she, got a really good price. I made this deal because it needed pretty much gut renovation. So I bought it for 125. I think it's worth now like 1.8. And the way I made that margin is just I brought my crew from Chicago because the renovation over there is so expensive. It's probably 3x, whatever you would spend in Chicago. And that's what increased the margin. And yeah, but I bought it pretty much for myself. And when I'm not there, I'm Airbnbing it, and it's for me zero base. Actually, there's some profit left. My son, he's managing Airbnb, and he's getting $500 monthly from the top, and then we're splitting the revenue. But we spend at least 2-3 weeks during the winter. And then we'll collectively probably spend, I don't know, like 30-45 days. We're going there next week, and we're not paying probably $30,000-$45,000 a year just for that stay if we would stay in hotels or whatnot. Plus we have everything else, and the rest of the days they cover your mortgage payments, and these properties increasing, even like coastal properties and mountain properties compared to Midwest, historically, they increase the value, way more compared to regular Midwest properties, So actually I was able to combine, investment as a store of value, not necessarily cash flow, because the value increased significantly. Another thing is I always wanted to have to create a space when my kids will grow up and they have their grandkids, they will be able to come in and they will want to come in. My family is scattered throughout the world, and it's for us really challenging to get together. Mom is trying to do that all the time, so maybe we'll get together once. But I know in the wintertime, I don't have to ask now. Everyone just wants to come in because there's nothing available during the Christmas and winter season, and I have the spot pretty much for almost 10 people, and that's kind of my thing. I'm always going to be paying for that and buying airfares, and I'm going to be always hosting when I'm 70. I would like to do that. So they will come in because there is only that many spots you can ski in the world during the Christmas.
Nice, nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember, I think you asked me if could ski, and I was having these like major knee issues. And this went on
Yeah.
for like, man, it's been like 5 years, maybe even like 8 or 10 years that I've had these odd aches and pains in my body. And
Yeah.
I'm like, track my diet. I have everything down to the gram, right? I started doing that maybe 2 years ago. I stumbled on in the last week the fact that I had really low sodium, and I started
Oh.
eating 2,000 more milligrams of sodium a day, and the knee pain is like almost non-existent. My back pain is gone. The strength of my muscles is like double and triple. I feel great. I feel like
Oh.
fantastic. And here it was, Saul. When I looked through my tracking, I could find like there were days I would have 650, 700 milligrams of sodium, like, oh, low salt. You want a low salt diet, avoid salt. So I kind of was basing my life on sort of that headline information. I found the sodium deficiency, fixed it, and now I'm like going to have to meet you out there in Vail, and we'll go skiing one of these
Oh
days because
yeah, for sure. You're
I think my
invited
knee's
anytime,
going to
brother.
hold up now.
Yeah, and yeah, so for sure, I would love to do that. Yeah, I would love to do
Yeah,
that for
man.
sure.
Yeah. What was the thought going through your head? You may have already touched on it, and maybe what your son said from the back seat as you guys turned and saw the mountain in the background, and you were like coming up upon that house and seeing it for the first time.
Can you repeat the question? I'm sorry, my
What
dog was barking.
what were the words that either went through your head or the conversation in your car, assuming you weren't by yourself, the first time you turned the corner and saw that house in Vale?
When I saw that house in Vail, what was one in my head? Um, no, I mean, I really was no any talks that I can. No, it was just really I just wanted to have something like that, and I didn't. So I didn't think about cash flow, meaning I looked at this and I thought, okay, this is the property I want to own as a trophy property. And if I don't look through the filter of the cash flow filter at, achieve 10 cap or 12 cap or, whatever cash on cash, I could justify it because I knew it's not going to be taxed on my freedom, and we can touch on that later on. Meaning, I know that that property will be always dear and close to for me, and I did not really care about how much I'm going to be cash flowing. So it was kind of in the second, even if I would end up losing in terms of cash flow, I would still buy it, And of course, I did the perform after that when it wasn't a contract. It's definitely not performing to the level I can put my money into in industrial property. But I don't have desire to go and spend a month next to my industrial property. I can get there one sec water, but
Yeah.
so I don't know how to put that on a spreadsheet. How many
Yeah.
memories? How can you put the value of the memories? When you think about your kids, you have like my friend has a book called an event has 18 summers, and you really have maybe when you're skiing with them, maybe you have 10 times in your lifetime, right? So how much money you can put in that? And there's no selling spreadsheet like that.
Yeah, you're right about that. That was Jim Shield. Is that who wrote 18
Jim Shields,
Summers?
yeah, he has
Yeah.
a book, great book called Family Board Meetings, and then he has an event called 18 Summers that he hosts for entrepreneurs, and that's his message. Really beautiful message.
Yeah, yeah. He was on the show, I think maybe a year and a half ago. So I'll make sure to link to the notes. It was really interesting that you bring that up because that's part of we can become as investors, Robert Kiyosaki and just all of it everywhere. Save every
Yeah,
dime, the compounding effect of a dollar,
yeah,
live below your means. And I think there's a place for that. You do that for 5 years, 10 years, a decade, and then at some point you realize, oh, I'm cash flow handcuffed. I'm handcuffed by
yeah,
the cash flow. In my mind, I have the limiting belief where if I stay on that, Saul, I can't buy my vacation home because it doesn't make sense as an investor. So I have to like find the freedom and give myself the permission to kind of like make
exactly.
that next big move. And it's like 18 summers is great. I mean, my daughter's 22. I think I heard about it and she was 20 or 21. It was like,
Yeah,
oof, yeah. But
yeah,
there's going to be a lot of those kind of places and moments in life, right? I mean, Jim's kids,
exactly.
I guess, probably around the same age as mine, maybe a little bit older, if I'm not mistaken.
I think Theo
Um,
older, but he has few younger. Yeah,
that's right. That's right.
yeah,
So it's like at some point it's going to be their kids, and it's the memories
exactly.
on Kilimanjaro and the memories in Vail. That's probably going to be more important than what was the dollar amount in the estate when we happen
Yeah.
to leave this life, right?
Well, I'm sure you will not remember your cash flow position, let's say in 2060, but you will remember, when you went to New Jersey shores and spent time with your daughter.
That's right.
You know,
That is absolutely right.
yeah.
Um, Cool. So the progression from 2019 through 2024, before the episode, I was talking about going bigger, optimizing what's working, maybe through scaling the properties in your instance. And then the
Hmm.
other end of that coin is leaving behind what's not working. And you mentioned the words pruning your life, pruning your
Yeah.
portfolio, constantly pruning now. And I think Scott Shield may have mentioned some of that pruning as well at one of our commercial
Maybe,
academy.
maybe, I don't remember where exactly I picked up this term, but yeah, pruning the life, I think I'm actively doing that right now.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
I can speak that. I think there's the way I would tell a story about this. I think it started this conversation in my head, probably 2018-ish or 17, when it was a part of Strategic Coach, and it was with Dan Sullivan when he shared the story with me. It was pretty much during the lunch and in at one of the masterminds. And then it actually has also entire segment how he teaches that. So there's two ways to grow, right? There's one way when you grow in scale through many transactions, and you actually, probably you're reducing the price of your transaction, but you're increasing the speed of frequency of transaction and getting more and more transactions, right? So this is the Amazon type model. You can grow this way. Another way to grow is, that's called like McKinsey model, right? When actually you're doing less transactions every single time, you want to do less transaction, but in bigger volume. And there is no better or worse way to do it. Pretty much, in terms of volume per certain amount of time, let's say per 5 years, you may be capturing the same amount of markets in terms of dollar volume, but you can do it either to 10,000 transactions, or you can do it to 5 transactions. In both ways, you have to scale. In one way, you're scaling through speed of many transactions. In another way, you're scaling through your own capacity. So your own capacity, you're able to execute on bigger and higher and bigger deals, whatever that will be. It could be real estate, business, whatever it is. So when I heard that, I'm like, it was really, it's the first time I kind of understood this, how it can be done, right? Let's say, McKinsey probably can charge, $5 million for, a month consultation. If, let's say, Wells Fargo is in trouble, how to address the situation, because they don't have to train, consult 100,000 people. They can do it with one CEO, if they know how to do it, right? So it's an interesting model. So yeah, and actually, very quickly after that, I started going through the direction of buying commercial properties and consolidating my residential properties. And probably mentioned on the last podcast, I think, when the first building I bought, actually, the first building I bought in University Park is 76,000 square feet. I bought it for 950, I believe. Yeah, it was 950, and we'll put 250 into it. God willing, 7 years later or 6 years later, we selling that. It's for 5.7 right now on the market.
Wow.
But if you look at the amount of effort and execution, even at the time when we're stabilized, I remember I did the math. I was an eclectic genius at the time. And an amount of cash flow it started generating right after a year when we recapitalized and pulled our equity out. We were, we bought a vacant box, but we stabilized it. We had only one property manager, a part-time property manager, only 4 tenants with 5-year leases who never called triple net. So I believe that to generate the same amount of cash flow and equity build up, I had to build, I think, if I'm not mistaken, about 40 houses. 40 houses compared to one building. So it was just like, oh, they kind of, it really makes sense. You can do a lot of many transactions, but you can do one big transaction. And in terms of output, you're getting probably better, because there's another thing we can transition. No one talks about tax on your freedom in real estate community, right? There's so many times, including me, and I see people, and they get to that cash flow, so to speak, freedom. They get their cash flow to whatever their expenses are, and supposedly they're cash flow free. Yeah, they don't have to go in the office and plow from 9 to 5, but in terms of freedom, they preoccupy 24/7. They probably getting 60, K1s and dealing with 20 CPAs. They have 28 partners. If 14, they don't like them. And it's just like, where is that tax on freedom? So so that's where we're coming to pruning the garden. I was in event earlier this year. Joe Dispenza, you meditate there for a week, and you getting a lot of clarity. It's kind of a soul searching event, and you really many people getting their those answers after staying in silent and just being with yourself for 3-4 days. It just realizing you're starting to see what you haven't, you're not able to see when you just keep doing stuff, right? So for me, it was very obvious, let's say, that I have to start pruning my life in terms of how many trips I do, how many how many courses I take, how many buildings I have, and there is could be two buildings, there could be the same cash flow, but in terms of energy, it could be different drain. Could be that with one partner or few partners, you have no friction, it just goes easy. With another one, maybe there's always some kind of tension, or maybe it's and you really cannot put it in a spreadsheet, because in a spreadsheet it looks the same, on PFS it looks the same, but in terms of drain and tax, on tax and your freedom, and that's how I label it, tax and your freedom. So I'm pruning the garden, I'm pruning my life, and I'm getting rid all the fucking garbage out, garbage out that has the most tax and freedom. It could be 14 cap property basis. I don't care. Out.
Yeah. So the first pruning you did, um, you were, I didn't listen to the episode that we did last time, but I know that you had, I don't know, 30, 40 rental properties. How
Yeah.
many of them do you still own?
Sold all of them. All of
Right?
them. All of them. Yeah. And yeah, that's another, actually, just want to just plug in here, another thing where people don't, maybe that's only for me because I sharing, but I'm not getting the similar feedback. So the maximum boost on your freedom, guys, at least it's for me. I've done it a couple times when actually, it's so hard to go and sell everything. But when you're selling you're converting your spreadsheet wealth to cash. All of us are delusional. Usually it's gonna be at best 70%, maybe half, when converting the cash. So that's when you're looking at your real net worth. You're
Yeah.
getting that cash. It's really amazing feeling. But another thing, you're getting so much freedom. You don't deal anymore with bunch of CPAs, bunch of property managers, bunch of all this, whatever comes in from this cash flow responsibility. It's really, really amazing feeling. Of course, then it doesn't last. My nature, then the cash start burning your pocket, and you're chasing something. You're quickly investing in something else. But that's probably that moment is the maximum amount of freedom, and no tax on your freedom. I mean, you're paying the tax because you're converting and you're getting haircut from your spreadsheet wealth to cash wealth. But that's really cool.
Yeah, and it's like there's probably people listening right now who are buying one, two, three rentals. Maybe they're
Yeah.
listening and it's like, man, if I could get a rental property, that would be great. If I could flip a house, that would be great. Maybe they flip three, four houses. Man, if I could get just to 10 rentals, 5, 6,000 a month, positive cash flow, that would be great. And we're not saying that's a bad idea. A lot
It's
of
a
times
good.
for me, you got to kind of, I don't know, I have like 49 units across maybe 15 properties. And I'm at the point where you were. It's time to convert them to cash and consolidate them into a single short-term rental property that's high end. And I believe in the market. I know the market. I've known it all my life, because I want to consolidate the number of tax bills I have to deal with. The number of water bills is a headache in the city of Philadelphia. Um, Number of mortgage refinances that come due. I can get a single
Yeah.
30-year mortgage, 30-year term, put a very large down payment, 1031 into this property, and then it's on autopilot. So I have less, literally, Saul, one of my least favorite things about owning property right now is a mailbox full of freaking bills, insurance proof requests. I hate
Yep.
opening envelope. I hate it. I'm trying to get everything on an e-pay, and that's not available for
I
everything.
know.
They're sending me building court code violations in the mail. I don't want any of it. I just want that all into one single store of value, the way you talked about for Vail. And it's driven by, I think honestly that this property will perform better than any of those individual properties I'm going to sell. But I wouldn't even have that option if I didn't take the time to construct and build that portfolio house by 3 unit, by 10 unit, et cetera. I wouldn't have the option I have now to consolidate if I didn't make those moves in the first place. And, we'll probably look back 5, 10 years from now and we'll be talking about consolidating the things that we think we're consolidating into right
Yeah.
now, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So I think that's where it is really what, I don't want to say the older we get, right? But it takes time. You can explain someone right now who doesn't have the first rental property. and there will be probably, it's very hard to get through to that mind. I think if I would tell myself that thing right now, 15 years ago, I mean, I would not be able to convince myself. Like, what are you talking about? I mean, I just need my cash flow. But I think it's that perception always changes as you go, right? So it just, I think for me, in the last 5 years was just Kiyosaki cash flow model is not all be all model, meaning your perception in your life will change, and there's in the way I see it is just you're going to be chasing more and more freedom, and cash flow is just only portion of the only one aspect of that freedom. And yeah, so just evolving perception, I think. I think Scott Shields once shared I don't know if you've heard, but if you look at the life or cycle for real estate entrepreneur, it starts, call it, with maybe residential flipping houses and then apartments, and then moving to commercial buildings, and then becoming a developer. And if they still have bullets in their pockets, keep going. A lot of times they become a financier when they cash out, and they keep financing real estate projects from a financier perspective. So that's how we see the evolution of any real estate professional, I would say.
Yeah, and I really like the consolidation aspect. I mean, I think I'm 44. What are you, 43? Is that
44.
44? Okay, we're both
Yeah.
44 years old.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I also like the consolidation strategy into like single assets that are easier to sell. That vacation home I'm going to buy, Saul, if I pass away, my daughter doesn't need a lot of real estate knowledge to be able to sell that at market price.
Exactly. Exactly.
Imagine
Yes.
selling the 30 or 40 the units, these apartment buildings. It's a complex negotiation just to get them over the finish line,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Or imagine getting the mall that needs to be refinanced every single 5 years
5 years.
with all complex, 60 deals baked in with percentage rents and this and that. It's a science by itself.
And the size of the capex. I mean,
Yeah.
somebody in an estate having conversations around a $280,000 roof. How do they know if that's a good deal? Should it be 140? Is it really
Exactly.
supposed to be 390 and this guy's about to half finish the job for $250,000?
Yeah.
So I build the portfolio with an eye on, I don't know, I guess the end someday, and that's part of the consolidation benefit over time now think of. And I'm not like retiring and riding off into the sunset as we speak. I'm definitely hustling, grinding, and still continuing to do a lot of deals and like level up in a lot of areas. Um, and you're one of the inspirations for that, Saul.
Oh, thank you.
Oh yeah,
I inspiration back at you, man. You're my inspiration. You're
nice.
always been a marketing genius for me. I learned so much.
Appreciate that. So you touched on the mall. Rafik's show will air right before this one, and we
Okay.
touched on Piqua a little bit. Five hundred
Mhm.
11,000 square feet. He said you guys are at 70%, 75% occupancy right now. Does that sound about right?
It might be hitting 80. We just signed Arcade. So yeah, right 75 to 80%. I didn't see the rental the last couple of weeks, but yeah. Yeah.
And
So
that
we
and
bought
that
it in April.
timeline,
Mhm.
April of this year, last year.
No, 2023. Bought in April 2023. I think it was 35-ish percent occupied. And right now we're called 2/3. So briefly, it's a mall. Usually it's four wings. Last two bottom wings were Sears and Elder Beerman. We converted that to flex industrial warehousing. And this is where expertise comes in. We chopped it off into small units, 5 to 20 30,000 square feet in. So that leased fairly quickly. And then we start focusing on food entertainment. The first tenant I brought was Champlain Park. A couple of restaurants, six food court concepts. We negotiating right now. Pickleball court and arcade was just signed right now. Kind of high-end arcade. And we brought a gym, a couple other tenants. So pretty much we focused in the front food and entertainment. In the back of the mall was warehousing. that pretty much stabilized an asset because we bought it so inexpensively. So we pretty much cut it up that half the building. That's where we can service our debt, and it's paid over there. And the rest, food and entertainment for us, it's pretty much gravy. Yeah, so that's in a nutshell. This is going to be, $30 million asset when we're done. I think we're going to be all in 10 to 12 million, all in.
Nice. Strong deal.
Yeah.
Strong deal. And you guys have done a couple others, but one of the things I think was interesting, um, just watching the entire progression of your career, Milwaukee Tech Center, other buildings I don't know the name and the address of, a leasing machine, just a total leasing machine. And I think that's a competitive advantage that you have that gives you the confidence to take on 511,000 square feet where 380,000 of that square footage is vacant. And not many other people can approach an asset of that caliber if they have no confidence in their ability to lease. And you guys did this with no one lives in Piqua, no one lives in the state of Ohio. No one, to my knowledge, really owned any substantial assets in the state of Ohio who decided to pull the trigger, and you guys did. Was the leasing machine that your leasing experience, your ability to fill those spaces, is that maybe the primary driver why you guys felt confident to go forward?
I would say yes. Leasing capacity. That's the main decision factor when we buy it. And of course, when we buy those assets, another thing is how inexpensively you can buy, base price. A lot of times we can think, okay, we can even scrape this and sell it for land if leasing would not go as well as we want to. But really, decision making is just leasing. If it seems like we can lease it, and my experience comes in from just buying so many houses and doing direct to seller marketing. So right now we pretty much employ every single possible channel to go after direct to tenant marketing, and direct mail, Facebook, Craigslist, Google PPC, text messaging drops, cold email campaigns, everything what is in marketing arsenal. We pretty much employing, and we're spending 5x 10x than any agent can spend, just because the commissions cannot pay for this type of marketing. But when you think about it, there's just those assets are in the best locations in the country still. They're just obsolete because they have to be repositioned. But when you reposition, you just have to just outmarket, and you have to offer affordable pricing that will come in. So leasing is our probably competitive advantage compared to anyone out there right now. And it's really pretty much a sales machine. I have like in old days, I have leasing huddles, I have accountability meetings, I have I don't know how many dozens of funnels running. There's all KPIs. I'm building the dashboard and the screen, which is it's really granular level, and this is what I learned direct to seller marketing when I was flipping houses. And when you measure every single piece of how much you spend, what's appointment cost, how much is the lead cost, how much is the so you're measuring that, and you're just putting more fire in those funnels, and you're booking way more appointments than anyone else.
Yeah, and it becomes this marketing driven business that's driving the leasing, right? And most people would not catch that from the outside. Oh yeah, they bought a mall, they redeveloped a mall. When they say redevelop a mall, most people think, well, here comes the bulldozer, and they're putting in some ramps for the industrial, and they're changing out the fire sprinklers, and they're doing blueprints, right? But the thing that actually drove the value was this business model of a leasing machine. That now maybe that has to be fed the way people who have built a fix and flip machine, they got their contractors and they feel obligated to keep feeding the contract. It's like, oh God, once I stabilize Piqua, we just built this team and I got like 10, 11 people, however many it is, I've got to keep them fed. So now we're like looking for that next asset almost to keep that machine full. Is that
pretty much?
accurate? Okay.
It takes time to build a machine. Yeah, it takes time, and it's expensive, when it's idling.
Yeah, and that's a big part of it, right? You're front loading all of this marketing expense for the leasing. You're front loading six, seven, eight, however many millions in tenant build out, um, just general capex on the property. You're
Yeah.
having to front load all of that, and if you did it the old fashioned way, you might build it and think build it and they will come, right? Which is I think a
Yeah,
lot of
exactly.
people's
Yeah,
belief.
exactly.
Yeah, whereas you're able to sort of pour gasoline on the fire with the leasing machine and get the leasing velocity is just off the chart compared to someone who's going to build it and they will come type of strategy. That can only come with a certain amount of scale in the business. So if someone buys a 30,000 square foot warehouse building and they whack it up into 6 spaces of 5,000 each, you can probably sit down and do some of that direct leasing machine marketing on your own and sort of fill the asset, but I don't think you get to the point where you drove enough value to get people on the team to do a lot of that work. Where do you think that scale lies in there? Is that 100,000 building, 150,000 building? Does it have to be 500,000 square foot building? Like where does scale exist in this model?
Um, hmm. Mm, so I think I proven I verified that the model would work with the Milwaukee Tech Center. That was 165,000 square feet. And pretty much, I would say I did that with just having a couple of VAs where they would help with the posting ads and maybe replying, with some of the leads, but all their negotiations, all the, phone calls and actually tours were done by me. And we didn't have 300,000 square feet in between. We jumped right on 500,000 square feet. So 500,000, definitely I was not able to handle all the communication that comes in. It was no, it was just right away, like 5 times more on every single possible channel that comes in. And I just had to to leverage tours with a tour manager. We had we implemented discovery call in between, an asset manager position, and 4 VAs working on one asset. So if I would think right now, it's 500,000 square feet. That's where just physically is impossible to manage that much of the incoming traffic and how much you have to how much marketing you have to manage. But 150, 150,000, you can do it yourself with
Okay.
and the schedule is pretty much 5 tours a week, one lease. That's your schedule. But it's full time. It's a full time 150,000 square feet. You can do it.
Yeah, yeah, it's a big lift. The example of scale and pruning, part of the conversation we've already had. I remember calling you probably this time last year, and I found this like 45,000 square foot building. It was kind of already whacked up, and I'm like, oh my God, Saul probably already saw this. I was like afraid to call you when I put my offer in, and you're like, oh yeah, it's just too small. It's just like not going to work. It's not worth the time. I was like, oh God. And to me, it was like this large, humongous deal. And I did make the offer. It wasn't accepted.
Yeah.
But it was interesting to see how fast, your progression to pruning out the smaller deals came. Maybe as an illustration of that, your mindset around maybe what were the last one or two deals that you closed on, or what would you think the next one deal would have to be for you to want to take on another one?
Uh, yeah. Well, I can touch on one deal that probably I talked about last time. There's one of the first deals. I think that was probably the second deal that I bought. It was a 5805 South Archer in Chicago. We bought it for 750. The owner was retiring, and pretty much we were buying as a vacant box. During the due diligence, I negotiated a deal with his general manager that he's going to be taking over the lease instead of shutting down the business. I didn't have to do any tenant improvements. And he did not have a very good credit or anything like that. I think we signed a lease for like $10,000, and it was covering more or less, debt. And I think there was a little of the cash flow. So that deal was a little bit of a gamble. How I was buying is vacant. It was retail, and so it's hard to lease. But it was in a great location. And then a year later, that happens very often. That tenant wanted to buy the building, and we sold the building for 1.4 a year later with the SBA financing. So that's one of the deals that I would call it like smaller deal, 15,000 square feet. And then from that point on, we moved on. I think next one was, 30,000 square feet, one in Tinley Park. And then another one was 165,000 square feet. Right now, the most we bought was 500,000 square feet. Mansfield, I think, was 450. We looked at few malls right now. One in one in Omaha, another one in Wichita. I know that's probably pushing 1 million square feet.
Wow.
They're not really intimidating in terms of their size. They're intimidating. They're intimidating in our capacity. And capacity is because we're running right now. Let's say my capacity. I'm running. Three projects that they have to lease up. Probably close to 1 million square feet, and to add additional million, it's a stretch in terms of time. So, yeah, so probably next one should be 1 million. If I if I would think right now, but I have to prune my garden before I jump on that one.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I don't know if that's even is that the right answer? Do you have to have 10 million someday? Is there like sort of an end goal there? Where's the summit?
Where is the summit? Yeah, I
If there is.
if there is, look, it might be not 10,000. It might not be 10 million square feet. It might be even in something different. It could be something that I don't know. I mean, just spitballing. Maybe you create some financial product that you're able to finance, or to multiple people in the industry, or it could be even something different. You're like,
Yeah, it makes
like if
sense.
there's a jump from housing to warehousing or to malls, it's not necessarily even different asset class, completely different game. You know, the way I see my career, every 5 to 7 years, almost I shed my skin and jump on something else. So I would not be surprised if it would happen.
Fair enough. Fair
Yeah.
enough. Um, are there any other trends you see in the market right now that you're looking to capitalize on, or maybe these trends are things that have you worried for some reason that might be interesting for us to discuss?
Yeah. Trends. Hmm. Well, I see that self-storage is past its glory. We're selling all our self-storages. I think we have one. We've sold one. We have one under a contract right now. God willing, hopefully it's going to close in Clarksville. We have three more in Florida. We're putting two on the market, and we're going out of that. I think Small Bay, it's at the tail end. I think Small Bay is where self-storage was 2 years ago. It's a hot commodity, but I think it has 24 months of its beauty, and it's gonna be over. I think malls is a game right now for I don't know how many years, maybe 3 to 5 years. Um, Definitely office definitely is the game in town. Not too many people still jumping on it. I think that one has a lot of potential. Whoever is going to be able to figure out the model how to go after it.
Yeah, maybe it's different models in different locations, right? You have,
Yeah.
um, my opinion is within 5 to 7 years, the downtown core comes back to life again. So the
Hmm.
downtown is not the fun place to live. We're getting over the COVID hangover.
Yeah.
We had the protests or the riots, depending on which city you lived in, going on, and it kind of shook the city core, I think. And cities
Hmm.
have done that historically. I know they weren't exactly the place to be in the 50s and 60s, the city, and that was because of the highway system came in. And then the cities, actually, with the advent of the REIT, so when you were able to securitize real estate in like the 80s, 70s, and 80s, a lot of the down, or actually, I guess it was a little bit before that, maybe it was the 60s and 70s. Um, Eminent domain was used pretty heavily in a lot of cities to turn
Mhm.
the center city into like the urban cores that we're familiar with today, with a lot of these like tall buildings. They lost their luster, I guess, in the 70s and 80s, and then kind of came back again maybe in the late 80s and the 90s. But
Yeah.
you have this like cycle, and I think, right, I'm kind of making this up, but I think that the cycle, saw a lot of times, will come from people our age now. The kids and everything, maybe they're a little younger and they thought the city was like the coolest place to be. They wanted to live in the city. So when you have the peak population sort of thinking the city's cool, the city becomes
Mhm.
cool. And then all the cool kids living in the city, suddenly they get married, they have kids, they have families, and now they're,
Well,
yeah, now they're in the suburbs. So it kind of has this like vacancy that happens. And then, maybe this next younger generation thinks it's cool again to be in the city. And it's like, it depends on how many people in that age group exist at any given time, and then overlay that with these events like you had during COVID in the city. So when that becomes sort of an ancient history thing, I think that the allure of the
yeah.
city is going to come back. So I think 5 to 10 years, you're going to see a lot of those centrally located office buildings there and in full capacity again. I think that people working in office, um, have more exchange of ideas. There's a different kind of richness than can be had over strictly Zoom call type running of meetings. And I'm bullish on the city long term. I'm not so bullish that I'm running in there and buying some of these $1 or $2 million towers with my own money, because I don't like the idea of trying to carry that for 5 or 10 years at $350,000 to $500,000 a year in taxes. That's probably a bit unsustainable for me personally, but I think that the inner city office can come back to life. Um, like with malls had a variety of solutions. There's what you guys are doing, and that's novel, and that works when we're in an area like Piqua, Ohio. The mall in Media, Pennsylvania, was the Granite Run Mall, and the solution there was scratch the dirt, and now there's this mixed-use complex going up, sort of
Yeah.
replacing it, right? So maybe there's
Yeah.
a variety of solutions for the office building. Some have to come down. I heard someone say, "Office is not overbuilt; office is under demolished."
Yeah, I've
Right?
heard it. I've heard that. Yeah, I've heard that. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I want to add to this also the way I see this, right? And a couple of weeks ago, I was in Miami, in Miami, and visiting my friend. He lives in an apartment building, and it's been, I've seen obviously apartment buildings, but me personally, I lived in an apartment 20 years ago, and nowadays apartment is just so much different. Of course, what you see, in terms of difference, it just amenitized and for the people, it's no longer just only the place to go and sleep, but right now it is the place to work on the first couple levels. There is, pools, there is cafes, there is coffee shop, there is high-speed internet through the buildings. So let's say if I even think about the buildings, why are they getting obsolete? Yeah, we're getting hit by COVID. No, yeah, definitely there is, those trends, what you're talking about, everything, every single generation. I remember I saw a movie a long time ago. It was the movie Zeitgeist, in early 2000s, and there was a futurist. I think he's a French dude. It was really nice, futuristic kind of, movie. The way he sees in the future, how it looks, everything. Look at, I don't even Chicago called Trump Towers, right? It's not only a tower for residents. There is a hotel, there is a garage, there is a cafe, there is a terrace, there is apartments. So if I look at if I have a magic wand, right, how to make the building not from cash flow, but for the people the most appealing and pleasant, right? So you have that vacant, glass and drywall tower, and you're making it, you're slicing it to, a little bit of the apartments, a little bit of the co-working space, a little bit of the movie, a little bit of the gym, a little bit of the restaurant, there's a little bit of the library, a little bit of the terrace or penthouse on the top of the pool, a little bit of the garages, a little bit of the grocery store, a little bit of this restaurant, another restaurant, and something that maybe a venue for the concert. I mean, and if it can be pegged into the capital stack that is getting returned, and assuming zoning codes is getting relaxed, it's really not a delusional idea. That's how I think eventually buildings gonna go. It will go when they're gonna get amenitized. Same thing we're doing with malls, right? Malls is just how we can create more and more amenities because people want to be together. People want to congregate. Yeah, I want to go to mountains, but there's a times when we want to congregate. So that's how I think.
Yeah, that's very cool. Bigger vision and creating a destination, just like you did with the malls, but then doing
Yeah.
that into these office buildings. Or
Hmm.
yeah, I guess it would be the office buildings, right?
Yeah, I could. Yeah, so that's right now what needs to be. It could be right now at the office. Maybe in the next 20 years, we're going to see the same thing happening with apartment buildings that no one lives to live in apartment buildings. There is going to be like, um, I don't know, just
Outdated, right?
communal spaces with, just with little tiny rooms like in Japan, and everything else is communal.
Yeah, it's funny. Like, marginal research I did on like New York City coming through and Chicago coming through from the 1800s to now. I was surprised at how many buildings of like 8, 10, 15, 20 stories that were demolished and then replaced with a much better, newer, higher quality building. And those buildings probably happened in the 60s or 70s as steel construction was coming through. But it's like we may see a time where we're going to see a lot taller buildings, some of them
Come
come
down.
down. it's just
Well, I
it's
did
just
not
how it
know about it.
is.
So research says that a lot of them were demolished, not repurposed, but completely
Oh no,
leveled
these
and
were
rebuilt,
like, yeah,
right?
10, 12, 18, 20 stories, and they would take them down and then like rebuild something probably much taller in its place. And it's
Hmm.
happening on a small scale, or it was happening on a small scale in Florida. So Florida, the condo collapse happened a year or two back. A lot of new building codes and building code violation legislature has come through in Florida, and they're going around making people do a lot of facade work. So now you have condo owners who bought for like $80,000 their unit back in 1980. The building was built in the 70s or the 80s, and the construction is not great. Well, they get hit with, let's say, $250,000 special assessment because they're going to need to do like $15 million worth of work to the outside of the building, and there's, I don't know, 30, 40 units in there. It's like 6 stories tall, maybe. Well, they're going in because of the location, and making offers to everyone in that building. Maybe the market's like 300,000 and they're able to pay 450 per unit for the land. And now they're putting something up in its place that's like, 30, 25, 35 stories tall, and it's brand new construction. So they're scraping for 3, 4, 5 story buildings and
Wow.
buying out the condos. We're seeing in Chicago here, not as much now as when the interest rates were low, but condo conversions to apartments. So it's a similar, very complicated deal with the majority of the owners of the condos to execute on a deal like that. But some of that's already taken place, right? So it'll be
Mhm.
interesting to see. It'll be interesting to see. And it may be some big headlines if outdated 30, 40, 50 story buildings. Like, can these buildings, were they built to actually last forever?
Mhm.
It's hard to
I
say,
think I
right?
probably not. The economic life was maybe like 60 to 80 years max, I think, right?
Yeah, it's
And
like,
and then you have to yeah, I don't know if they can hold longer.
I mean, that's why we depreciate the building in the IRS tax code, is because it's literally
Exactly.
suggested that they're not going to last forever. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, we'll see. So I have a couple questions here before we wrap up, if that's cool.
Yep.
And I know I asked maybe one or two of them before on the last episode. So I'm going to restrict book recommendations, one or two of those, to something you have read that you found impactful in the last 1 to 2 years.
Okay. Last two books. Well, I'm reading right now one, How to Make Few Billion Dollars. And I even forgot
Okay.
what it is. It's by the guy who built $5 billion companies, and it's really tactical information. It's really interesting to see how people at that level of ability to scale the business, how they think. Um,
You
that's
know the
one thing.
author. You know the author to that one,
Uh, not how to make.
Brad Jacobs. It looks like. Does that sound right?
Yep, that's the guy. And Brad Jacobs. Yep, Brad Jacobs. Yep. And another one would be which one I would recommend to the readers? Um, Ego is the enemy. Ego is the enemy. By always okay. So ego is the by Ryan Holiday.
He's put out quite a few good
Yeah.
books in that category there.
That was just more recent ones that I read and piqued my interest.
Nice. So if you could go back and share with yourself in 2019, the crown jewel of wisdom, knowing everything you know now, Saul, what would that be?
What would that be? Everything is gonna be all right.
I love it.
Everything is gonna be all right. Just keep going. So what I would tell myself is just our fears and defenses are overrated, and I think that's our chatter now. Meaning we will always just at least in my mind, I think risk in my head actually is disproportionately larger than actually the risk it is.
I love that. I'd agree 100%. And I'm going to take that one. I'm going to take that one to heart for myself. Everything's going to be all right.
Everything is going to be all right. Yeah, everything is going to be all
But
right.
so I have two more questions. Before we get to my final question, the newsletter, or is there
Mhm.
somewhere else you would like people to go to get some more information and maybe stay in touch?
Yeah, so I do have a newsletter on a Substack that was video newsletter, but I'm transitioning that to a text written newsletter. Um, the easiest way to go, just go on my Twitter or X, Saul Zenkevicius. There is a link over there to that newsletter, and just subscribe and follow me there. Right now I have monthly newsletter coming out, but starting August 1st, I'm going to have weekly. I don't have anything to sell. I am going to be sharing mostly with case studies of the projects that I'm doing. That's the feedback from my readers I'm getting that want to listen. But it's going to be evolving. And the name of the newsletter is Commercial Real Estate Matchmaking. Commercial Real Estate Matchmaking. And this is matchmaking everything what comes in real estate, the tenants to the buildings to locations, to lenders, to investors. It's just all that magic of what's going on in a commercial real estate.
Yeah, I love it. And what you've put out so far has been very nuanced and detailed. And I think people may initially look at it and say, oh, yeah, this is simple. But if you're listening and watching the videos, they're well done. And you recognize that they're from the context of the mind and person and team that took the 511,000 square foot vacant mall and not that highly populated of an area and took it from 30,000, or I'm sorry, 30% occupancy to like 80% in 15 months.
Yeah,
That nuance and that detail should jump off the page or jump off the video at a much higher level if you view it in that context.
yeah.
Yeah,
Appreciate
it's
it.
great. It's
Appreciate
great.
it.
So my
Thank
final
you.
question before we wrap, what is the kindest thing that anyone has ever done for you, Saul?
Kindest thing but I have ever done to me. Um, hmm. Well, the only thing that comes in my head is my dad giving me $600 in it was gifting me when when I came here to in America 2001, and that was pretty much almost last dollars. That's the only dollars I had when I came here to UA to study in UAC.
Wow. Very cool. Very
Yeah.
cool. Saul, thank you again for being so generous of your time. I've got pages of notes. I'm sure the listeners enjoyed this episode because I sure did. Appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dan. It was great. Thank you. Let's do it again. And I want to see you on a mountain in Vail.
I'll be there.